members of the public who wanted to comment? Seeing none, we will adjourn the public hearing on the school calendar, and we can call the combined study session regular meeting to order. If you'll, Mrs. Luton, if you'll note that Mr. Lee's and Mrs. Twitty's absence, and please join me in standing for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Dr. Ritter, you had some special recognition.
I do. This evening I'd like to recognize several of our staff who have gone above and beyond as far as helping us with our quality initiative, and they've become Missouri Quality Award examiners, and that involves really about 60 hours of work, and then several of them also participated in site reviews, and I believe one of them, I'm not sure who it was part of eventually a Missouri Quality Award winner. So anyway, a lot of experience, a lot of training, and have come back and really been a real prize to us. So if I could have these people stand and be recognized, and remain standing until I'm all finished. And so Leslie Ballou, Leslie, and she is very aggressive and loves working as an examiner. Am I right, Leslie? She's really made a lot of connection with a lot of the examiners across the state. Way to go, Leslie. Pam Bodine. Pam is another one who is really very, very acute. Okay. And understands. Okay. And has a real good sense of quality as well. Curtis Cunningham. And Curtis is really one that you can't tell me what site, but learned an awful lot from his visit to a site. And then Les Ford also was trained this last year and learned an awful lot. Ben Hackenworth and Justin Harrell, the three executive directors. Justin, there he is. Okay. I didn't say anything, but anyway, the three executive directors bowed out of the site visits mainly because of it takes an awful lot of time away from your work, and we need to keep them on top of our sites. And then we had Brian Hubbard. Is Brian here with us today? I don't see Brian. Brian heads up our title services and really learned an awful lot. And then Anita Kissinger. And Anita, really, you were trained 3 years ago. And then Parker McKenna. Parker was also trained as a biology examiner. And then, of course, I'm a trained biology examiner. Did I miss anybody out there? Okay. Thank you all for all your time. We hope to double that number this coming year, and it's amazing how it raises our ability and also raises a good critical eye for us. So I want to thank all of you for your time. Appreciate it. That's all.
Do you have any from Partners in Ed?
I don't have
Okay,
that.
that's fine.
You didn't get a list? Okay. Partners in Ed? I think we have somebody here. Hold on. Dr. We do have somebody, yes. Oh, here's Brian. Okay. There's Brian Hubbard. Hey. Okay.
All right, I have it. Thank you. As you know, we like to recognize our partners in education. I also think this is going to be published somewhere soon, according to Josie. Some of those who have participated with us recently are the Galois Theater, Las Margaritas, Mutual of Omaha, Red Monkey Foods, Sell It Fast Auctions, Springfield Host Lions Club, Springfield Greene County Library Midtown, the Springfield Greene County Park Board, St. John's Sports Medicine, and Victory Trade School. And now we get to have Josie McPhail, who's our Community Relations Specialist, introduce our special guest.
Good Good evening. Tonight's Partners in Education highlight will be brought to us by City Utilities of Springfield. They've been a partner in education since 1993 and have done lots and lots of things since then. They currently have a partnership with Central and also at Boyd. So over at Central, City Utilities provides a really unique learning experience for our freshmen over there. The program is called the Central Advantage, and it was created to assist freshmen on focusing on goal setting, budgeting, and voting, 3 very important things. And throughout the school year, 3 90-minute learning sessions are hosted by City Utilities. So obviously that takes a lot of time and resources on their part, and provides our students with a really unique experience. And City Utilities employees are also encouraged to participate as a volunteer on their own time over at Boyd. So here to tell us some more about this great partnership, come on up, is Debbie Kreider, and she currently serves as the Safety and Training Manager in the Human Resources Department.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I'm sure my presentation won't be as good as the margarita place that you mentioned a while ago, but I'm like, what kind of partnership do they have? Wow, that's great.
I've never heard of margaritas. I don't know what they are.
I don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, it's a restaurant. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But our partnership was started back in the 93-94 school year, actually by Mr. Lee, Jerry Lee, and about 12 other people at City Utilities, along with the Central High School A+ Advisory Committee, and that was when the Outstanding Schools Act started. And so they wanted to partner with us, for one thing, because of proximity. It works out really well because the students will walk across the street to our facility. But we wanted to help the students transition from school to work, and then help to lower the absenteeism rate and the dropout rate. I hope that we've been a small part of that, but I mean, we can't take all the credit for that, but I think this has helped. The partnership has won several local and national awards. I know the National Association of Utility Commissioners, that we received an Excellence in Education Award from them. The Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, we as Central and City Utilities received the Best Practices Award, and then also we received a Thomas Hartwood Excellence in Education Award with this partnership, just to name a few of the things and we have a lot of different organizations that will call us and contact us and want to find out a little bit more about our partnership. Like Josie said, we bring the students over. When the partnership first started about 17, 18 years ago, we had 100 to 150 students. This year we have 408 that we have come over all throughout the year. And there are 3 different categories that they come over for. They come over for exercising your rights, which you can guess what that is. That is for voting. We actually bring Mr. Struckoff over. We have them to actually do a campaign. We might let them vote on school uniforms or graduated driver's license. And then we have a campaign where we have pros and cons to both. We have a ballot box there. We will stuff the ballot box and see how they feel about that, you know. And but anyway, that we go through all through that in a 90-minute period. We have about 30 to 40 students at each module. So we have several modules that we have to do. We also have a module that's treasure mapping, and what that is, that's budgeting. We actually let them sit down and figure out what kind of career they want, what compensation they are going to have, and what their lifestyle would be with that kind of career. So the guys that want to play basketball, which we all know that's what a lot of the young men want to do, we tell them, what if you have a broken leg whenever you're 21 years old? How's that going to work out for you? So anyway, we go all through these monthly expenses for them and let them work through that. The next module is puzzle pieces, which helps them critically think about things. Like, we give them a personality profile, and we say, who do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be? Where do you want to live? We make them think about those kind of things. And it's really funny because we have about 110 people volunteer throughout the year, our employees, and some of them are scared to death of these young people, and because of, I mean, they just are. They're scared if they have piercings. They're scared if they have hair that's not quite the color they want it to be. And we actually, I've I've kind of started this little thing over there where we actually do training for our employees, some of them, because they're so intimidated by the students. And I want them to be able to enjoy them. And I say, you know what, if the student leaves their head down and looks down all the time, you continue talking to them and you continue interacting with them, because they'll take something home with them. So it's been a real good thing for City Utilities and Central. You know, I tell our employees all the time, this doesn't just benefit the Central kids, this benefits us as well, because more educated students helps us to bring more educated workers in. So the Boyd, Josie had mentioned the Boyd partnership. What we do is a lot of our employees will go over there at lunchtime, and they have one little reading buddy that they go there every week, and they talk to, and they read to, and they do things like that. So anyway, we try to interact a lot. We get a lot of calls from schools in Springfield that would like for us to come out and help them with resumes, the students, and we do all those kind of things when we can. So any questions? Thank you for having me here. I appreciate that.
Debbie, thanks to you and to your staff that does this. Good. Any modifications of the agenda, to the agenda? All right, thank you. President's report, thank you, Ms. Luton, for getting me back. That was part of the President's report. I don't think Jerry had anything special that he wanted to bring to our attention. I would like to say kudos to Dr. Riggs for some well-deserved and well-written recognition in the newsletter. And you'll sign this for us, won't you? Dr. Ritter, Superintendent's report.
I just really want to report that, hey, we're here in a joint meeting for a reason. We had some weather issues, and so we've had 6 snow-related days, and I think really a smart decision, not on my behalf, but on Dr. Riggs' behalf, as well as Tom Tucker, as well as Rick. Rick, are you? Yeah, Rick's there. We've had, we really come together early morning, and they come together early morning, and then they give me a call, and then I usually head out about half the time, because it's pretty obvious that it's a tough decision, and then a decision is made. But what's really neat is that Dr. Riggs calls all the areas, well, they call her as well. It kind of goes both ways as far as all the regional superintendents, and also all of them are on a call at the same time with the national weather people, which is really nice. And so I think the decisions that were made, of course, I've been called an idiot, I've been called a genius, I've been called different things, but not as bad as in other years, let's put it that way. In fact, the idiocy and the genius all came on the same day, because I think parents are getting tired and they wanted their child in school on that day. But either way, what I want to mention tonight is that we do have 6 days, and so that does put us right at our limit. And really, June 7th is our last day, I believe, right now, as far as our schedule is concerned. There is some legislation that's in the works coming from the House, I believe it is, or the Senate, I can't remember which way, that is going to call for a release of any kind of days, responsibility for days during the governor's announcement of emergency. And so what we're talking about there is probably 4 of our days. And so it's going to be an optional, and I sense that this will probably be approved, who knows. But if it is, and it's optional, we will discuss it as cabinet. We will discuss it with our leadership and come back to the board and advise you which way to go on that. I have a feeling that's going to come rather quickly, because it's going to have to. Other than that, our attendance as of today and yesterday, it's very, very good. I think the kids are back, and it really pushed back. And the state is considering, I think they've even made the decision to push back the state testing by a week, I believe. And so that is going to happen. And so it really is like they came off of the holidays, and they're back at it and going real hard. So just want everybody to be aware of that. Thank you.
I don't think we had any public comments to address agenda items tonight. Informational issues, sample ballot, Dr. Ritter.
Yes, we have 5 board candidates, and these candidates, The election is April 5th, and it will be for a 3-year term, and we're going to be, the public is going to be voting for 2 of the 5 candidates, and the order on the ballot will be Denise Frederick, sorry. The first one, Carl Hurd will be number 2, Thomas G. Prater will be number 3, Mark Heffington will be number 4, and Don Carricker Jr. Will be number 5. So there you go. That's what the ballot's going to look like.
Thank you. Dr. Riggs, calendar.
Yes, Justin Harrell, Dr. Harrell.
Good evening, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. You should have received a copy of an information item concerning the 2011-2012 calendar, as well as copies of the 2011-12 calendar and draft copies of the 12-13 and 13-14 calendars. This calendar is unique. There's been a lot of time and meetings and information and input gathered for it. Annually, the board is asked to adopt a calendar, and we have been practicing since 1997, offering you 3 different calendars to keep things moving and the information in draft form so that we can make any adjustments on an annual basis. But with this year, we are coming off of a 176-day school calendar, which Springfield has used for many, many years, and looking at revisions into a 170-day school calendar. Legislative changes have allowed school districts to look at a 4-day school week calendar as opposed to a 5-day, and or a blend of the 2. And the calendar that you have in front of you is a blend of the 2. So there will be 4-day school weeks scattered strategically throughout the school year to allow for professional development and professional work in a much more focused component than we've had in the past. This will eliminate our early release days that we have had for several years and replace them with full days, again, for teachers to do professional development, professional work, to review data, and then to use that data to influence decisions and influence instruction. So we feel like it's going to be a very powerful piece. We will continue to schedule more than the required 1,044 hours. This calendar schedules currently 1,060 hours. In recent years, we have scheduled 1,090 hours. It's important to note that DESE requires a minimum of 7,080 minutes for each unit of credit offered at the high school level. And so because of that, and because of the reduction in the number of days from 176 to 170, some of our high school sites will extend their current student contact days in order to meet those Carnegie unit requirements, those minutes. And additionally, in order to keep us in line with credits and keep us moving correctly with the number of minutes, it's going to be important that there is no scheduled quarter of less than 42 days as we adjust to this particular calendar, which you'll notice in all of the 3 that you have in draft form. Tonight we had a public hearing to allow input for the calendar, and that will be an annual requirement for the board if you choose to adopt a calendar that's less than 174 days. So those are some of the key components. I'm sure there are absolutely no questions. No, I'm kidding. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. And you'll bring this back to us at the next meeting for a formal vote.
That's correct.
All right. Discussion. Ms. Callan.
Could you elaborate on how the individual sites are going to make up for the discrepancy of minutes, or how that will be accomplished? Or
Certainly. It's really based on the number of credits offered annually. So if it's a high school that offers 8 credits annually, then in order to get enough Carnegie minutes per Carnegie unit in, they will expand their contact time. So that may vary building to building. That means the time that the students are in the building. And that could vary anywhere from 10 to as many as 18, 19 minutes. They're still working on those schedules.
okay, but it would basically probably be extending the school day
Yes,
by that
yes.
amount
mhm.
of time? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And then the other question I have is it the intent of the calendar committee to keep this at 170? I mean, do we feel like 170 school or student contact days is the ideal, or is this, I mean, is this a hybrid based on the economic times we're in, as well as adjustments we feel we need to make? We've listened to our community, and they haven't liked the half-day releases, the half-day release for professional development. So can you just give a little bit of kind of like, I guess, a philosophical background of, do we intend to stay here?
Absolutely.
Because it's a significant reduction.
You know, we believe that the district right now is at a very high-performing level. I believe that we're getting a lot of bang for our buck with the teaching process within the classrooms, and I believe our students are performing at a high level. Now, that's never to discount the need for contact time and the need for those students to be with teachers. So for the professional development component of it, and to be able to maximize that time, that was one of the primary motivators for looking at a shortened day calendar, or excuse me, a shortened week calendar. And the legislation in the state allowed that flexibility, so it was an opportunity for us to react to some new flexibility offered by the state. However, there's another component too, as always. The economic situation that we're in also was a driving factor, and this calendar is also a cost-reducing component. So I think that for the first few years, if we do choose to go with a 170-day calendar, if that is what the board adopts, we're certainly going to have to look at that and make sure that our performance not only remains high, but continues to improve. And if contact minutes becomes an issue, then that's absolutely be something that we'll look at again.
Am I right that this is actually one less contract day for teachers?
It's actually 2 less contract days.
Two
for teachers.
contract days less. Okay, because I had to look back to do that. And on the professional development, is it district professional development? I mean, I see that before school starts, which is what we've had before. But then I see 2 other times where it's looks like district, K-5 and then 6-12. Are all the other PD days building level?
When we let Anita,
Yes, ma'am.
answer.
Yes, sir, excuse me.
When we let Anita respond to that.
Yes, it's no change in the district professional learning time. District professional learning time is limited to 2 days in the rest of the time, and that was one of the motivations, was to provide additional time for teachers to focus on what their student learning needs are in their building and with their capabilities with data, to provide them with more time for them to be able to effectively utilize the data. So we are not increasing the district professional learning time. This extra time for teachers is for their site work.
Let me just say, I really like this as I like the full days. I like the fact they're in the buildings and can focus on what their needs are there. And I mean, I think this is probably not, it's not ideal as we look at other countries and systems, but we're also in an economic time. I think there's been some real positive changes made operating within those constraints, and then looking at what we can do to still deliver quality education. I think this will be a good test as to see whether this will work by doing this next year. So I think the calendar committee's done a real good job.
In light of our alignment in central office, you know, the adjustments we're making in central office, it's going to be more into the hands of the site. And there is really a neat challenge. I was wanting to grade a day, a neat challenge with the principal and the teachers, parents, students at the site to take that data, and they need the time to be able to make those decisions. And then as they're making the decisions, they themselves decide what type of development strategies, and they need to be thinking out of the box a little bit. And so I think it's an excellent time for innovation. So at the sites. and unique. Every site is unique. So,
Any other discussion?
I guess the only question I would have would be following up on Chris's question about, you know, cutting the days down from, is it 174 to 170? Is that right?
176, right?
176 to 70. So we're cutting 6 days of instruction out of the school year. I'm sorry, is that wrong?
Well, some of them are only half.
They're all
day.
Some of them are partial days. It's really probably easier to look at in a reduction of hours, Mr. Hosmer, and we are reducing from 1,090 hours to 1,060 hours. But yes, there is instructional time being lost.
I mean, I'm assuming that there's not an argument that increases or is that, and maybe I don't know, but it seems like the answer is that less instruction time is not good. Is that accurate?
But we, as a district, we have always stood on the component that we want to have as much time as we can with our teachers and our children. There's
Because we've had
no doubt about
more
that.
instruction time than what was required by the state. I'm
Yes.
assuming for a reason.
Yes, sir.
So I just think that, I mean, it seems to me that we're doing this because we got to figure out ways to save money. And this is another way to kind of try to jerry-rig things and save a little money. And I understand this is going to save us money, and we need to do that. But you know, and obviously when we do these things, we need to make sure that we do them to the best of our abilities. But
yeah, I would venture to say, because we're giving staff more time to look at data, collaborative type of approach, the whole faculty study groups, I think we're going to find that we're probably going to be far more efficient, okay? In other words, staff making smarter decisions, quicker decisions in the classroom with this strategy. And then I could see us building back the student-teacher contact. I really think we need 15 to 20 days more than what we have. And so what we're doing now is really becoming very efficient and effective, put that in place, and then respond and grow from there is what I think needs to happen. So,
and I'm glad that we've got the data that we can immediately see kind of how this compares to years past in terms of growth models and
Yes, sir.
what's going on in individual classrooms. So, but I just don't think that we can say that this is going to be an improvement as much as it's going to, you know, the best thing we can do with the funds that we have.
I'll echo Mr. Hosmer. I think, and fortunately, we won't have next year's data back before the decision is made for the following year's calendar. So I think we do have to be on top of it, and we may end up deciding to add more professional development days and more student class days as we go on. And the other thing, and then go ahead, Chris, is the nice thing is with the effectiveness of the bond projects, then after this next year, the ability to start class early, and our parents have been asking for years to finish up the semester before the winter break, and we've not had that ability before.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, of all my years on the board, I don't think there's ever anything more controversial than the calendar for the year. I mean, if I get comments from patrons or parents or staff, it's almost always about the calendar. And I will say that I have gotten some comments, and they've all been positive in terms of the way that the professional development days are configured and not leaving those early release days that, you know, really are quite inconvenient to working families and families that don't have the flexibility to leave their jobs to go get their children. So I think that this does a lot of different things. There's not just one, you know, aspect of the calendar that this is addressing. So, I mean, I think that this does address some patron concerns over the past few years, that model that we used in terms of professional development, whereas it helped us deliver some of that instruction to our staff. It really wasn't the best model for our students and families. So,
yeah, I think the thing is that the teachers are going to be able to be far more professional. going to be, really mastering their trade with the data. The other thing that I think we need a little caution on the early start. I do think and we discussed this in cabinet a little bit, we do need to take time to study that as well and sit down with parents and talk about how early and what that looks like. And we got to make sure that there's good buy-in with that as much as anything. So, okay.
Well, to that end, I'm glad to hear they're moving. Even though we don't use map tests as much as some other districts, it'll be reported.
Right.
No matter what. So we can say, well, we use it kind of as a benchmark, but that's not our main thing, but it's still going to be reported. When other districts start earlier and they have more instruction time before the test than we do, we've just not been on a level playing field at all. I know some have been out more time than we have with snow days, but they still have more instruction days in before the test is given. If they move it back a week, they're still going to have more time. So, if we're going to be compared to those districts and we're going to use that, then our instruction time before that test should be within a day or two if we're going to have that. So I'm glad after this year we'll at least have an option to look at that, because we just haven't had that in the past.
Thank you, Dr. Harrell. This will come back as an action item for separate consideration at our next meeting. Moving on to action items for separate consideration, I think we have our final set of bonds to authorize.
Yes, Mr. Chodes, please.
Thank you. As Dr. Prater pointed out, before you is an action item that's essentially the end of the road for the issuance of the $50 million in bonds that was approved by the public. This last issuance was approved, or the authorization for George K. Bond to offer the bonds was approved at the January 18th meeting. This is for the $9 million in bonds to defease the Hickory Hills lease purchase obligation, and I'd like to invite Greg Bricker to the podium to discuss it with the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chodes. He stole most of my thunder. We did offer the bonds this morning. The average interest rate on the issue was right at 5%. The sale went very well. As Steve indicated, this does conclude the final issuance of the $50 million that was approved in November of '09. I've done some calculations on the overall $50 million plan, and the average interest rate on the entire $50 million authorization as a blended rate was 3.02%. And it's kind of hard to do this calculation. I conservatively estimate that participating in the various government subsidization programs that we did, the qualified school construction bond program that got a lot of discussion when we were initially considering placing this issue on the ballot, and as well as the Recovery Zone Economic Development bonds that came about after we had the bonds approved, and the Build America bonds. All in, we saved just slightly more than $8 million in interest expense as compared to doing this financing the traditional tax-exempt fashion. So I applaud the board and the community in their wisdom to go forth with the proposition in 2009, and would be glad to entertain any questions that you may have.
Could you please review, because I think I've seen some discussion. Could you just review for the public's benefit why we did this, why we did these issuances in staggered amounts? Because I think that there's some feeling that maybe this is something new or wasn't part of the original bond. And so I just think it would be helpful to give a little bit of a timeline of why we did things the way we did.
The first and foremost reason would be that the process of allocating the initial qualified school construction bond allocation by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education was not going to announce to school districts what portion each district in the state would receive until sometime in May of 2010. We knew that we weren't going to get the entire $50 million in QSCB allocation. That was a given. We realized that there was an opportunity in advance of that May 2009 date when there was going to be a significant increase in Missouri school bonds, because most all school districts were sitting on their thumbs till that announcement was made, that we could proceed forward and bring part of that $50 million out in advance of May of 2010 and try to capture a more opportunistic market because of the low volume of bonds at that time. So we elected to bring out $22,250,000 of bonds at that time, of which a portion of that was $10 million and change that were Recovery Zone Economic Development bond allocation that had to be issued and closed prior to June 30th, otherwise that allocation would have expired. So our first round of bonds were done in the April-May 2010 timeframe, brought out not quite half of the $50 million to take advantage of market opportunities and a deadline on the Recovery Zone Economic Development bond allocation. The second round of issuances occurred in the August-September timeframe. We brought out another roughly $18 million of bonds. That would have included the qualified school construction bond allocation that we received of a little over $7.5 million. That allocation had to be issued prior to December 30th, 2010. We also received an additional Recovery Zone Economic Development bond allocation from the Department of Economic Development that had to be concluded before, I believe, October 1st. And the balance of that $18 million was done as Build America bonds. The last piece, which is the piece before you tonight, the $9 million, was always planned on being issued to basically correlate with the next payment, the March 1st, 2011 lease payment on the Hickory Hills financing. There was an advantage to delay that financing as close to that payment as possible. So basically we did 3 rounds of issuances, a April 10 issuance, a August 10 issuance, and a February 11 issuance, and that's my answer.
Yeah. Well, I think it's helpful because I think it's a very complicated concept, and I think really putting together the puzzle in different pieces has ended up saving us $8 million of interest. So I mean, I think that's
I don't
what
think
I
Steve
think
really believed me when I first mapped out this back in March of 2010. I think I was pulling his leg, but I was entirely serious, and we have, I think, pretty much followed that roadmap. I don't want to say that there couldn't, in hindsight, have been a better format, but I'm very proud of the plan we put together. It definitely turned out well in the district's behalf. We have accomplished all the goals that the financing was initially set to present, and I was commenting to someone this morning that I was actually going to miss this bond issue because it actually did force a little bit more thinking than a regular bond issue. Not that a regular bond issue doesn't have a certain amount of thought involved, but this one was it was a bit of a chess game.
Well, we appreciate your strategy.
And you'll probably remember that we talked about with that early issuance, which we did try to get out pretty quickly, we probably took advantage of an attractive construction bidding climate here, so potentially saved even more money than had we waited on some of those. So the timing was perfect. Charles Murray.
And walk us through the $8 million in interest savings in terms of how we realize that. I mean, is it a situation where we're going to be able to do $50 million worth of work and in essence $42 million, or kind of walk me through that if you could? Can you?
Probably at least half of that, $8 million, and the worksheet behind that math I did not bring with me, but I would say at least $5 million of that was attributable to the Qualified School Construction Bond Program. We, in effect, got zero interest rate money on $7.5 million. Actually, our net rate on that was 0.16%, so 16 basis points. That was the big saving component.
And those are some of the latest payback too, right?
Correct. The Recovery Zone Economic Development Bonds, you may remember that we did two different Recovery Zone Economic Development Bond series. The first one was $10,067. Initially, that allocation had been granted to Ozark Technical Community College, OTC, and they had plans to use those Recovery Zone Economic Development Bonds on a project they were contemplating. That project got delayed, and basically, and I am fortunate enough to have the relationship with OTC, and when they did come to the conclusion they were not going to use that allocation, I asked them whether they would give me permission to contact the school district and inquire about the school district's desire to have that allocation transferred by the city to the school district. And Marla Moody and Dr. Higdon indicated yes, that was appropriate, so I contacted Steve and started to introduce him to that concept. The $10 million, and we got an additional $3.6 million of Recovery Zone Economic Development. So roughly, not quite $14 million of Recovery Zone Economic Development bonds that combined had an average yield of probably 2.8%. I'm going to say probably 2 million of the 8 million were attributable to those bonds. So that's 5 plus 2 is 7. The other $1 million savings would be taking advantage of what are referred to as these Build America bonds, which are basically lowered the average interest rate compared to a traditional tax-exempt financing, probably to the tune of 30 to 40 basis points. And we did 2 Build America bond series with 8 plus 12, about $20 million.
And am I correct in my analogy, getting $50 million worth of projects done and in effect paying the equivalent of $42 million? Is that a fair analogy?
Maybe.
Well,
I'm not trying to be coy, but the money from the bond issue goes to Capital Projects Fund. The $50 million is $50 million. Basically, it's we're going to spend $8 million less of the taxes collected from the 51-cent debt service levy that will be available in the future to service debt that the community may elect to approve at some point in time in the future, and that $8 million would be additional dollars to spend. So I'll split the difference with you and say that we'll get the $8 million, but it probably isn't this issue, it will be a future issue.
Well, thank you for explaining that. And it leads me to my point that I hope constituents and other people understand that, some of this economic stimulus and stimulus money gets a bad rap, but this has done really good things for this district in this bond issue, A, and B, in the last 2 years has allowed this district to not make drastic cuts to our budget that our constituents certainly wouldn't have wanted. C has allowed the state of Missouri and other states the last 2 years to not make drastic cuts in their budgets. So when people talk about stimulus and badmouth, there are real positive impacts that money had in Springfield. And I think it's important that people understand that, and we're certainly going to get a peek at it going forward when a lot of that federal money is no longer available, both either to the schools or to the state. I just kind of want to make sure that we were aware of how important that was and how much that has helped this district for the last 2 years at least.
And it probably accelerated the completion of the air conditioning program by at least 2 years. We had plans to always do this next issue after the '06 election that involved a levy increase. We wanted to do the next series of bonds on a no tax increase basis. We had been traditionally on a 3-year cycle. We voted an issue in 2000, '03, '06. We were focusing on an April '09 election at one time to do the balance of the air conditioning, but in the fall of '08, it was concluded that, number one, we didn't have enough no tax increase capacity at that time, and number two, the climate of the economy was such that it probably did not warrant placing an issue on the April '09 ballot, and that we were in all likelihood looking at either the 10 or 11 ballot to place the issue on to complete the air conditioning program. But and filing deadline for the April '09 election would have been January of '09. It was in February of '09 that the ARRA Act was announced, and these various subsidized borrowing programs were introduced. And as we started to crunch the numbers, it became more evident that, in fact, we could do a no tax increase issue earlier, and we elected to place the issue on in the November '09 election date, and that brings us to this evening.
Good.
Well, it also speeds up the use of operating funds when we pay off the Hickory Hills LPC.
Correct.
So instead of paying
Absolutely.
that 600,000, whatever it was per year on that note, that frees up, allows us not to make as drastic cuts going forward. So some really good positive impacts.
Yep. I'd listen for a motion to approve the bond resolution.
Second.
Dr. Holman, Mrs. Cowan. Motion to approve the attached bond resolution for the issuance of $9 million principal amount in general obligation bonds. Dr. Holman?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
We have some Kickapoo reporters here, and it might be good for them to write an article about the importance of math and how math can help you understand bond initiatives.
There you go.
It's really good. Okay.
8.02, policy HJCD. Dr. Ritter?
Yes, Ms. Grable? Oh, Mr. Ford.
It's me.
Dr. Prater, members of the board, you have before you a revision of Board Policy JHCD, administering medications to students at school. This revision is largely the work of our Coordinator of Health Services, Mrs. Jean Graybill, and she has done a very good job drawing in community resources and collaborating in the writing of this. Besides our wonderful school nurses, getting them involved, the Greene County Medical Society's Medical Advisory Committee has been very involved in these revisions, and Mrs. Graybill is here tonight if any of you have questions.
I just want to, I studied this over the weekend, and there are a whole lot of common sense changes in here that were probably long overdue. So thank you for your work on this. Thank you. This will be first reading. We will have 2 more readings. And 8.03, agreement between the Springfield R12 and the Teamsters.
Mr. McCann, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ritter, and good evening, members of the board. Action item 803 before you tonight is the presentation of a final draft of an agreement between the district and the Teamsters Local Union number 245. You'll recall that the Teamsters were certified as the recognized bargaining agent for the district's transportation drivers, aides, and nurses. And in June of 2009, we began the negotiation process with that group. In January of this year, we reached tentative final agreement with that group after a number of meetings and obviously several months. If approved tonight, the initial term of the agreement, which has been attached for you and for your review, would be effective tonight and continue through June 30th, 2012. The estimated cost is listed for you at $23,000 to the district's operating fund and $162,000 to the district's health benefit trust fund. Our recommendation tonight is that the board approve the agreement between the district and the Teamsters, and we are asking for your action tonight, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions for Mr. McKenna?
Is this for transportation nurses, right?
That's correct.
I mean, I think that maybe got lost in some of the media reporting, but this is nurse work with our transportation.
That's correct. The nurse, just the nurses that work on our school buses.
I guess, could you just explain what the increase to the health benefits trust represents, because I think that, for me personally, I think that's a positive step for what the board or the district's doing for a group of employees. So.
Sure. The district's health plan prescribes that in order to be eligible for participation in the health plan, employees must work regularly, be regular employees of the district, and work on a routine basis at least 20 hours per week. Over a period of time, the district had some substitute employees in this particular unit that began to work over 20 hours per week on a regular basis. But they were classified as substitute employees and therefore ineligible for participation in the health process. One of the requests that they made was that since those employees criteria of the health plan and did routinely work 20 hours per week, that they be considered eligible for participation in the health plan.
Any other questions? Take a motion. Ms. Callan, second.
Second.
Mr. Renner. Motion and second are that the board approve the superintendent or designee to sign the agreement with Teamsters Local Union number 245. Mr. Hosmer.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Thank you.
Dr. Prater,
Yes, sir.
even though it is a first reading, we still have the need to have the board vote on the medication adjustment.
Any discussion on the policy HJCD? Thank you for catching that, Mrs. Luton.
I was right here.
Yeah.
Oh, and I take a motion on that?
I'll move.
Mrs. Callan? Dr. Homan seconded it. Dr. Homan?
Aye.
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 Thank you. We need Mr. Lee back, don't we? All right, Mr. Treasurer's report.
You're doing fine.
No, that was great.
All right, if the board would open up the PDF file and turn to the January end. First, when I look at the fund, is the total revenue of budget current year compared to the percentage of year-end last year, and I always like that the current year number to be higher than last year, and I'm pleased to see that through January we're at 71.25% of budget, and through January of last year we were at 69% of the year-end number. So the revenue is coming in good. I do want to point out that the county revenue was up significantly this month over last January, and that's strictly a timing difference. We happened to receive it earlier than we did last year. Conversely, on the expenditure side, I like to look at the percentage of budget and hope that it's lower than last year. In this case, it's not. It's close. It's 45.77% to 45.4%. However, there is a caveat there, and that is that in January, the district was proactive in its approach to looking at the budget, and we actually reduced the expenditure budget by about $1.4 million. So if you look at the very bottom, under the 2010-11 section, under the budget column, you'll see that our beginning fund balance for the year was $20,705,000, and based on the modified budget, we're now looking at an ending fund balance of $22,189,000. So a significant increase there. Also, I would like to tell the board that, as I've mentioned in the past, December, January, and February are our big revenue months, and it is my intent to come to the board in March and present an update on the revenue when things are much clearer than they are. So, any questions on the Treasurer's report?
So we made mid-year reductions in the expenditure budget.
As we started looking at the budget for next year, we said, why wait until next year to address some of the issues? Let's be proactive and look at them this year.
That's important for our community to know that that's going on.
we need to approve the treasurer's report.
So move.
Mrs. Callen, Dr. Holman?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
That puts us to, I believe, action items for routine consideration.
I move that the board approves each of the routine action items as submitted.
Got that, Ms. Luden? Dr. Holman?
Aye.
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 Thank you. And I don't believe there were any other comments from the public of general interest. Legislative report, I think we've got a few things to talk about here. Importance, Mrs. Callen, why don't you start off with the MSBA
Sure.
activity?
The last weekend of January, Mr. Lee and I attended the MSBA State Board of Directors meeting in Columbia, and it was an excellent meeting in which we spent a significant amount of time talking about the importance of school boards being very engaged and knowledgeable about what is happening in Jeff City. The political climate in our state is changing rapidly. There is an incredible amount of money and influence being wielded and really being, in terms of public education, being attacked in this state. And I'm not usually someone who's an alarmist, but hearing about what's going on and actually seeing figures about the amount of money that was directed to the most recent election of now our current state representatives and senators is really, it really makes you step back and say it's really time for those of us who feel like public education is a vital part of who we are as a community and a country to step up. So we did, at that board meeting, the MSBA passed a resolution against the fair tax or any effort to modify the taxing structure in terms of putting it towards a sales tax or consumption tax. And I don't know if there will be the opportunity for us to review that resolution and possibly take a position as a board, but I think it's important for us to know that our state organization is definitely working on our behalf that way. There have been some very nonpartisan types of reports that have been generated that show that at least the way in which the fair tax is being introduced right now into our state would be devastating to public education and the funding of public education, as well as other services. And so I think it's really important that we stay on top of that and talk to our representatives, because quite frankly, some of our local representatives have taken an incredible amount of political contributions from people that are promoting this. So I think it's really important for us to be aware of that and to not shy away from taking a stand. In that regard, and I think this was introduced, I just have a draft form, so this is something that I'm not going to publicly release because it was handed to us there, but I think MSBA sponsored a legislative forum this week. It was today, right. So for us it was just impossible for us to attend, but they are going to begin to basically, like many other organizations do, is give report cards to legislators about where they stand on particular issues that are important to public education, such as charter schools, the fair tax, 10-year, allowing school districts to increase property taxes to fund early childhood programs. And so we are going to be asked locally to meet with our legislators and actually ask them to fill out this report. And I think this is a great move, because it really allows us, because I think all of us have been in the position where we've talked to somebody, they've told us that they have one stance, and then the vote comes and you see the results and they didn't vote the way that they told us they would. So I think this is going to help us have some accountability. And so I think what we've done locally in terms of engaging our parents, our patrons, making them knowledgeable about what's happening is going to be increasingly important. So I think we're going to be relying, just information, just what's important to us, because I think when the average Joe or Jane is confronted with the kinds of drastic changes that these influences are trying to wield in our state, I don't care where you line up on the ideological, spectrum, most people would say that's ridiculous. And so I think it's incumbent on us to make our community knowledgeable about what this would mean to us. And so, it makes me glad that we're engaged at the state level. And, I think we've always had strong representation there. Mr. Renner was president a couple years ago. Mr. Lee's in line to be president of that state organization in the next year or so. And it makes you glad that we have that kind of representation and collective power. So that's my report from that meeting.
Does the board wish to have administration put together a resolution on the fair tax and bring it back the next time, working with Mr. Lee?
I think you could get the resolution that MSBA passed, and
Okay.
we could take a look at it and
Okay,
see if
so
we
you
wanted
want,
to
you
take.
want, okay. I'm just curious if the board wants
That's
us to bring
consensus
that.
that we want to talk about that at the next meeting.
Everybody okay with that?
Well, the interesting thing is I think it was, I think this man served under Jim Moody, who's done the most recent report that I think most people respect him and his work over the years. And, he's worked for a very conservative Republican governor and has maintained, I think, respect on both sides of the aisle about his opinion. So, I think that his analysis is a good analysis.
We'll bring that then for discussion.
If anybody needs a copy of that, we can provide it. It's in a letter to the new state auditor. And along those lines, thanks for serving on that. Along those lines, we're going to have the legislative team from MSBA here at our March 1st meeting to update us on things that are going on. So that'll be our next meeting.
It makes you very proud. Really one of the chief lobbyists and assistant executive director is an alum of Hillcrest High, and so she is very impressive and very knowledgeable, and so it makes you proud at that level too, to have that kind of representation at the state level too.
I told her she had 10 years to get into our Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, her chances have passed. No,
Any other legislative issues while we're on this subject? All right, so we'll bring some.
if I could, we do have legislative, there's a legislative breakfast tomorrow that the community sponsors, and I know Mr. Lee will be there for that, and Mr. Manus will be there for that as well, so just a heads up.
Well, and I anticipate it. Maybe we could just talk to Jerry about how this this legislative survey has been
Received.
Okay.
Drafted and finalized, and I think then we could talk about how we'd like to handle it at the local level.
Good. Future issues, a couple of things. we were going to have a presentation by city staff, Greg Burris and Mary Lily Smith, at our snow meeting that we canceled, so that, talking about TIFs and tax abatements, that's on for March 15th.
Right.
For the meeting, a 10, 20-minute presentation, so we can be able to ask them questions.
Probably more realistic, 40.
You told them 20, didn't you?
I did.
Okay.
Tell them 5.
Yeah.
I know, but they started out with 25 slides. I think they're down to 5.
Well, and we wanted to make sure Jean's here because she's our representative on the TIF commission. And,
Right.
you know, these are issues that affect our school district that we don't have as much control over as we might like. So I think it's important for us to know as much about it as we can and to wield what influence we can, because it's a direct effect on our bottom line.
Right.
Other future issues, looking at planning for our April board meetings. The study session is scheduled for April 5th, which happens to be Election Day. I don't know that that's a big conflict. I mean, there are a few of us in the room that we might have to shorten our campaigning period by an hour and a half, but, you know, if we haven't done it by then, we won't. The state law then requires 10 days that we swear in new Board of Education members within 10 days, not 10 working days, but within 10 calendar days of the election. Our next meeting is scheduled for April 19th. We can't have one the Tuesday in between because some of us will be attending the NSBA meeting. So our proposal was to have a very short meeting on Thursday, April 14th at 5:30. Mr. Struckhoff would be available to swear in the new board members. And we would recognize any of us that are outgoing board members, and also have board officer elections.
What time did you say?
5:30 on the 14th. So that would actually put us 3 meetings in April, but Mr. Lee promised that he would make the 14th very short. And it literally would be a 15 to 30-minute meeting, I think, at most.
Is there anybody that cannot make that?
And we don't have to finalize that tonight.
Plan is to have, I mean, I thought we had kind of taken a position at the board table that we did not want to have meetings during election.
Well, and that's up for discussion, right? That's why we brought it up tonight.
And I don't like it. I've never liked it. And I mean, there's a lot of people that have to be here that I'm sure would like to vote. And even though it's a school board election, I know at some point in time, we'd taken kind of a straw poll at the board table. We didn't want to have meetings on election day.
That's why we're bringing it up tonight.
Oh, I understand, but
Yeah.
And city council election, too.
Yeah. Well, and the converse is, with the budgetary discussions and everything that seems to be going on in Jeff City, are we, by shortening everybody's potential voting time by an hour and a half, are we affecting, you know, people's right to vote and all? And I don't think we have to decide that tonight, but we can sure talk about it.
I just think it's, particularly at that time of year, we start to really ramp up on talking about budget, and it seems like those are heavy meetings, and so trying to condense it all into one study session and board meeting, yeah, I think it worked okay this month, but April tends to be
Crazy.
heavy, so I guess I would prefer, prefer 2 meetings.
Any other thoughts? Well, we'll get Jean and Jerry's input, and then we can make a final decision on the April calendar, I think,
We're
next
trying
week.
to discuss it really March
Right.
1st.
Just be thinking about it. But I
Soon
think
enough.
that we do need to go ahead and be fairly firm on that April 14th
Right, no
date,
question
because we
that.
have Mr. Struckhoff available. So if you can't make that, let Ms. Sluden know.
Dr. Holman, you have no comments about April 14th?
You guys meet whenever you want to.
Now, he has to be here
That's right.
on the 14th.
Absolutely.
Immediate past board members have to attend, kind of like immediate
Yeah.
past president.
You can't be an immediate past board member until the new board member is sworn in.
That's
So,
exactly right. So he's
Yeah.
shirking his responsibilities if he doesn't show up.
Any other, that's right, we'll be chastised for it. Any other business? Financial and operations report are in board docs. Plus deltas, the board is blank there, so fill it up. No executive session tonight, correct, Dr. Ritter? Having no other business, we stand adjourned.